So I want to share a video with you from Mel Robbins. Mel Robbins is fantastic. Can't wait to share this with you. But I want to talk about why this actually matters, okay? This idea that dismissive avoidants tend to have around keeping the peace, just, not speaking too much about anything and not moving through conflict as a way of keeping the peace. We're going to talk about why this doesn't actually work, what you can do instead. And then at the end, we're even going to talk about how different attachment styles accidentally sabotage their relationships in the name of trying to keep the peace and how each attachment style tends to do this. And my hope for you is that you will be able to solve for this once and for all and stop drifting away from other people in your relationships because of not addressing things. Let's check this out.
You know how we all avoid hard conversations with people that we love because we just want to keep the peace. We don't want to upset anybody, and it's just easier not to say something. Well, consider this. Keeping the peace is not the goal of a relationship. Love is. And when you love somebody, you need to love them enough to have the hard conversations, because that's the only way that your relationship is going to get stronger. It's not through keeping the peace. It's through discussing the things that you love someone enough to actually discuss.
So, it's not through keeping the peace. And the first thing I want you to really understand here is that when we try to keep the peace externally, the conflict just goes internally. And that's where you're going to end up seeing yourself feeling frustrated, let down, hurt, resentful, or in the case of a dismissive avoidant attachment style, they just completely pull away. They keep the peace until they've just stonewalled. And every time we have a conflict or we feel frustrated or resentful between ourselves and somebody else, there's literally an invisible wall between yourself and that person that exists. And so you have one of two options. You allow that invisible wall to stay intact and you keep growing that invisible wall between yourself and that other person, or you turn around and you tear it down. And you tear it down by getting good at having hard conversations. It is one of the most important life skills you will ever build. Because when you have a conflict and you trust that you're going to be able to resolve it and move through it, what that actually means is that you trust that you'll be able to tear down the invisible wall from the misunderstanding or miscommunication that happened between yourself and that person. And by articulating what was going on and being able to acknowledge and validate what each other are feeling and actually how to address it so that you can meet each other's needs around it and feel actually resolved, you will leave that conflict being stronger than you were before the conflict took place. And if you don't address it and you don't have the hard conversation, then what ends up happening instead is you literally have this invisible wall, and that invisible wall just festers. You just grow the conflict between yourself and that person. And you might see that you're like, oh, you go home and you have an inner conflict with a person in your mind. Or as a dismissive avoidant often would, they build an invisible wall between that person, they stonewall further, and they keep you at arm's length. Doing this thing of keeping the peace does not work. There is no such actual thing as keeping the peace. And I think that's something so important to be able to recognize. So, number two, here is the actual framework that needs to happen in order to move through conflict in a healthy way. And trust me, when we talk about in integrated attachment theory, how to actually heal and change your attachment style, one of our six key pillars to changing your attachment style is learning how to have healthy conversations and communicate through conflict. And if you don't build this skill, you're basically on a one-track space to staying in the power struggle stage of a relationship forever. And that either means your relationships will break up consistently in the power struggle stage because you're not actually moving through conflict, or you'll stay in a relationship where maybe you'll stick it out long term, but you won't necessarily be happy because without being able to resolve conflict, you're not going to feel good. So here is a really high level framework, and then I'll tell you point number three and how it relates to each attachment style in detail. But here's the actual framework. In order to solve a conflict at a very high level, okay, you need to each have your feelings validated, okay, and heard out. And each person needs to feel like their needs are understood and there's a strategy for those needs. So I like to think of this framework as feeling, need, feeling, need. Each person has to be able to say what their feeling is. Hey, when this situation happened, for me, the feelings that came up was I felt afraid. I felt afraid of being abandoned, or I felt afraid of being trapped, depending on what your attachment style is. And what I need going forward is for you to, be a little more consistent in your communication, or for you to honor that I might need space to myself sometimes, right? So each person is going to be able to share their feelings, say what they need, and then we need a strategy to meet in the middle. So let's just say that's a conversation between an anxious person and a dismissive avoidant. Well, then maybe it's like, well, hey, let's have some consistency around communication. We'll have an evening check-in every day. And let's have carved out time where the dismissive avoidant can do their own thing. And even though those ideas seem like they're different, one person wants more consistency, one person wants more space, there is room for both of those things to coexist. They are not mutually exclusive. And we won't even be able to arrive there and see that so clearly until we each vulnerably share what we're feeling and what comes up for us and what we need and how we're going to solve for that and meet in the middle. Okay, so that's a very high level framework. Now, before I tell you how each attachment style tends to respond to conflict here, I also just want to let you know if you want to get really dialed in at this and just become a master at solving for conflict, truly, when I say this, I mean this. I don't think that there's anything more important than being able to solve for conflict. And I'm going to recommend that if you really want to do a deep dive into getting really good at this, one of the best things you're going to do is learn to regulate yourself in a conflict first. And for this and the support system to be able to do this, you can actually check out our somatic processing and nervous system regulation course. It's like the prerequisite to being able to even get to the feeling need conversation. And just for our YouTube channel, we are offering it exclusively for $19, just as a one time, literally for 3 days. And this is just because I feel like this is something that could provide value, be a great resource for you. So it's a one-off course, $19. You have 3 days. And it will really help in regards to navigating conflict and being able to be regulated enough to have the hard conversations. Okay. And it's also very healing to rewire your nervous system and learn to somatically process things. Now, the last thing here is that each attachment style tends to self-silence for different reasons, but these things are things that will absolutely destroy a relationship long term. So dismissive avoidance, they often try to just avoid conflict and stuff things away to keep the peace, but literally that conflict goes internal and their solution, conflict always will come out in different ways if you try to stuff it down internally. So their solution tends to be to literally build a wall and keep taking steps back in a relationship until they're so far away from somebody that there's literally no reparation that could exist, right? They're ready to just leave and get out of there, which is really painful because often on the receiving end, somebody's going, wait, where did this come from? I thought we were fine. But if you didn't speak up about things over and over and over again, and you kept building invisible walls over and over and over again, then when you do leave and break up with somebody and they have no prior understanding of what led up to it, it just feels like a blindside. Okay. So that's number one. Fearful avoidance do a variation of this where they will often hold things in until they've had enough and then they blow up. And sometimes that will be expressed through a lot of volatility. And often when a fearful avoidant then communicates, they communicate through what we call negative framing. They may say something like, you don't care about me, you never spend enough time with me, rather than saying, hey, I really want us to spend more time together. I'm feeling disconnected. And for me, that looks like having a fun date night this weekend and doing a weekly date. And so when you communicate through positive framing, you get heard. When you hold things in self-silence and then blow up and it comes out as criticism, nobody hears you. And then you're left feeling more lonely, more disconnected, more misunderstood or unseen than before the conflict even happened. And anxious preoccupieds, they tend to self-silence a lot. And the more they self-silence because they're people pleasing, the more they are abandoning. The more you stuff things down that you need to say that are sitting on your mind and heart, and you don't let yourself take up space or be seen or known, the more you are literally self-abandoning. And that's why you feel so anxious in relationships all the time. This is a huge contributing factor. So I hope this really sheds some light on why this is so meaningful and how you can actually change this starting today with that framework we talked about. And if you want to go deeper, you can check out how to actually regulate yourself before a conflict first. And I'll put a link to that description below. If you want to see more content like this, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. We share different gifts all the time on this channel. And I put out daily content for any situations you're facing to just try to support whatever I can that you might be going through in a relationship. Let me know any other content you want to see in the comments below and I'll make it. Thanks for watching.